Professor Tova walked into his classroom with the same nervousness he felt every time he taught this particular lesson. His thin body was covered in soft blue scales that changed color with his emotions. Right now, they were pale with worry. He was a Pelion, a species known for being careful and easily frightened. Teaching xenobiology at the Galactic Academy was his life's work, but some topics still made his heart beat faster. The classroom was large and round, filled with students from 12 different planets. There were Florians with their plant-like bodies, Mavari with their 4 arms and gentle purple eyes, and many other species that had joined the galactic community. They all sat in floating chairs that adjusted to their different body shapes. In the back corner sat a small figure that most students tried to ignore. Her name was Una Park, and she was the only one of her kind at the academy. She had dark hair tied behind her head, brown eyes that watched everything carefully, and skin that was strangely smooth compared to the scales, fur, and bark of her classmates. She never spoke unless spoken to. She never caused trouble. But something about her made the other students uncomfortable in ways they could not explain. Tova activated the holographic display at the center of the room. The lights dimmed, and a 3-dimensional image of a planet appeared, spinning slowly in the air. "Today," Tova began, his voice shaking slightly, "we discussed the most dangerous classification in our galactic catalog. Class 12 planets. We call them Deathworlds." A soft murmur went through the students. Everyone knew about Deathworlds. They were the stuff of horror stories, the places parents warned their children about. A Deathworld is a planet where conditions are so extreme that every living thing becomes a weapon, Tova continued. High gravity crushes bones. Extreme temperatures kill the weak. Radiation poisons the blood. And the creatures that survive these conditions become something terrible. He changed the image. Now the hologram showed a creature with long fangs and yellow eyes. It had fur and 4 powerful legs built for running. This is called a wolf. It hunts in groups. It can run for hours without stopping. It tracks its prey using smell alone. One wolf is dangerous. A pack of wolves is death. The students shifted in their seats. A Florian named Instructor Hound raised a leafy hand. "Professor, where does this creature live?" "On a planet called Earth," Tova answered. "A Class 12 Deathworld located in a remote arm of the galaxy." He changed the image again. This time, a long creature without legs appeared. It had scales and a forked tongue. This is a snake. Some species inject poison so powerful that a single bite can stop your heart in minutes. Others are so strong they can crush prey larger than themselves. More images followed. Tova showed them creatures with 8 legs and venomous bites. He showed them insects that traveled in swarms of millions, eating everything in their path. He showed them fish with rows of sharp teeth that could smell blood from great distances. Earth's oceans contain predators that have existed for millions of years without changing, Tova said. They are perfect killing machines. They feel no fear. They feel no mercy. The classroom was completely silent now. Even the bravest students looked disturbed. The plant life is equally dangerous, Tova added. Some plants produce poisons that cause pain, blindness, or death. Others have thorns that can pierce flesh. The entire planet is a death trap. He paused for effect, letting his words sink in. Fortunately, the intelligent species that evolved on this planet never developed space travel. They destroyed themselves in wars long ago, as violent species often do. Earth is now nothing more than a cautionary tale. A small voice came from the back of the room. "Professor?" Tova looked up. The human girl had raised her hand. He felt his scales flicker with surprise. She rarely spoke in class. "Yes, Cadet Park?" "I have a correction." Her voice was calm and quiet. Earth did develop space travel. Tova blinked his 3 eyes. I'm sorry? The records clearly state. The records are wrong, Una said. She did not sound angry or defensive. She spoke like someone stating a simple fact. Humans achieved space travel over 300 years ago. We have colonies on 5 different planets now. The room fell completely silent. Every student turned to look at the small girl in the corner. Tova's scales turned white with shock. Humans? You mean the species that evolved on Earth? Yes, Professor. But that's impossible. No intelligent species could survive on a Class 12 planet long enough to develop technology. Una stood up slowly. She was shorter than most species in the room, but something about the way she moved made everyone pay attention. Humans didn't just survive on Earth, she said. We dominated it. We hunted the wolves until they feared us. We built shelters against the weather. We created medicine to fight the poisons. Every creature you showed today, Professor, we learned to defeat. Tova's voice came out as a whisper. How do you know this? Una met his eyes without looking away. Because I am human. I was born on Earth. The reaction was immediate. Several students gasped. A Mavari cadet fell out of his chair, trying to move away from her. The Florian's leaves turned gray with fear. Tova gripped the edge of his desk. His scales were cycling through colors rapidly, a sign of extreme stress. You're telling me, he said slowly, that you come from a Deathworld? That you evolved alongside those creatures? Una nodded once. I grew up near an ocean filled with those fish you showed. We call them sharks. My grandmother taught me to swim with them when I was young. You swam with apex predators? As a child? It was good exercise. Nobody knew what to say. The entire class sat frozen, staring at the small girl who had just revealed herself to be something from their worst nightmares. Una looked around the room at her classmates. She saw the fear in their eyes, and something sad crossed her face for just a moment. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I thought everyone knew. She picked up her bag and walked toward the door. The students pressed themselves against the walls to let her pass. As if she might attack them at any moment, Una paused at the doorway and looked back at Professor Tova. Your lesson was very interesting, Professor. But you made one mistake. What mistake? Tova managed to ask. You said Earth creatures feel no mercy. Una's eyes were soft and sad. That's not true. Humans feel everything. That's what makes us different. She walked out, leaving behind a classroom full of terrified aliens who suddenly realized they had been sitting next to a monster for months. Without knowing it, Professor Tova stood at his desk. For a long time after the students left, his scales had turned a shade of gray he had never seen before. Everything he knew about the universe had just changed. News traveled fast at the Galactic Academy. By the time the twin suns set that evening, every student, teacher, and staff member knew about the human in their midst. The dining halls buzzed with whispered conversations. The dormitories hummed with fear. Una Park ate her dinner alone at a table in the corner of the cafeteria. The tables around her were empty. Students who accidentally walked too close changed direction immediately. She pretended not to notice, but she noticed everything. Her meal was simple. A bowl of grain, some vegetables, and a piece of cooked meat. To her, it was ordinary food. To the herbivore species watching from across the room, the sight of her eating flesh was disturbing. Humans were predators, they whispered. Look at how she tears into that meat. Una chewed slowly and kept her eyes on her food dot in another part of the academy. Professor Tova sat in Admiral Bourne's office. The Admiral was an ancient Corvati, a species with 6 arms and skin like old leather. She had served in the galactic military for over 200 years. Very few things surprised her anymore. But tonight, even she seemed troubled. You're certain about this? Admiral Bourne asked, reading through the files on her screen. I verified it 3 times, Tova replied. His scales were still pale from shock. Humans are real. They survived their Deathworld. They've been part of the galactic community for decades, though they keep mostly to themselves. Cadet Park is one of only a handful who have enrolled in alien institutions. The Admiral scrolled through images of Earth. She saw the wolves, the sharks, the snakes. She saw photographs of humans standing next to these creatures, smiling. They keep wolves as companions, she said slowly. They call them dogs. They domesticated apex predators, Tova confirmed. They bred them over thousands of years until the wolves became loyal to humans. They sleep in the same beds. They call them family. Admiral Bourne set down her tablet. That's either incredible or insane, possibly both. The Admiral was quiet for a moment. Then she pulled up Unipark's Academy record. Her entrance scores were the highest in her class. She passed every physical test without difficulty. During the orbital drill last semester, she saved 3 cadets when their safety lines failed. I remember, Tova said. I didn't understand how she moved so fast at the time. Now I do. She's never had a disciplinary problem. Her instructors describe her as quiet, respectful, and hardworking. That doesn't change what she is. Tova's voice was tight with worry. Admiral, you don't understand. Humans are pursuit predators. They evolved to chase prey until it dies from exhaustion. They can run for entire days without stopping. Their bodies heal themselves. Broken bones regrow. Damaged skin repairs. They have a chemical in their blood that makes them stronger when they're afraid. Adrenaline, the Admiral read from the file. Their fight-or-flight response. When most species feel fear, they run away. When humans feel fear, they become more dangerous. Tova leaned forward. And the worst part? She doesn't even know she's terrifying. To her, this is all normal. Admiral Bourne closed the file and looked at Tova with her old, wise eyes. Professor, let me ask you something. In the months Cadet Park has been here, has she hurt anyone? No, but has she threatened anyone? No. Has she shown any violent behavior at all? Tova hesitated. No, she's been nothing but polite. Then, what exactly are you asking me to do? Tova didn't have an answer. Meanwhile, across the academy, a Pelion senior named Do-Hwan Kim was doing something that surprised even himself. He was looking for the human. Do-Hwan was unusual for his species. While most Pelions avoided anything dangerous or uncertain, he had always been curious. He studied strange subjects. He asked uncomfortable questions. His parents worried about him constantly. He found Yuna in the botanical garden, sitting on a bench under a tree from some distant world. She looked up when she heard his footsteps. You can sit somewhere else, she said. I won't be offended. Do-Hwan sat down next to her. His scales flickered nervously, but he stayed. Is it true? He asked. Everything Professor Tova said about Earth? Yuna nodded. Most of it, though he exaggerated some things. Which parts? Sharks don't attack humans very often. They don't like how we taste. A small smile crossed her face. We taste bad to most predators, actually. It's one of our survival advantages. Do-Hwan's translator struggled with the concept. You survive because you taste bad? Among other reasons. He thought about this for a moment. Then he asked a question that had been burning in his mind all day. What's it like? Living on a world that's trying to kill you? Yuna looked up at the artificial stars projected on the garden dome. When she spoke, her voice was soft and thoughtful. You don't think about it that way when you're there. The danger is just normal. You learn to be careful. You learn to respect the things that can hurt you. But you also learn that most dangers can be avoided if you're smart. But the predators, most predators don't want to fight. They want easy meals. If you make yourself look like too much trouble, they leave you alone. She paused. Humans learned that early. We weren't the biggest or the strongest, so we became clever. We made tools. We made weapons. We made fire. Fire, Dohan repeated. The translator gave him a description. Controlled combustion, extreme heat, dangerous. Fire kept us warm when the world was cold, Yuna explained. It cooked our food so we could eat things that would otherwise poison us. It scared away predators at night. Fire was our first great weapon. You used a natural disaster as a tool. We used everything as a tool. That's what humans do. We take the things that threaten us and turn them into advantages. Dowan's scales shifted to a color of deep fascination. He had never met anyone like this human girl. She spoke about survival like it was poetry. Are you afraid of us? Yuna asked suddenly. The other cadets are afraid. I can see it in how they move away from me. Dowan considered the question honestly. I was afraid at first, when I realized what you were. But now, he looked at her carefully. Now I think I'm more curious than afraid. You don't act like a monster. I'm not a monster, Yuna said. I'm just from a difficult place. They sat in silence for a while after that. The artificial stars sparkled above them. Somewhere in the distance, other cadets laughed at a joke Yuna would never hear. Finally, Dowan spoke again. I'd like to be your friend, he said. If that's acceptable. Yuna looked at him with genuine surprise. In her months at the academy, nobody had ever offered her friendship before. Why? She asked. Because you're interesting. And because everyone deserves at least one friend. Yuna's smile was small but real. Okay, she said. I'd like that. It was the beginning of something new. Neither of them knew yet how important their friendship would become. 3 weeks passed after the revelation. Life at the Galactic Academy continued, though everything felt different now. Students still avoided Yuna in the hallways. Professors still watched her with nervous eyes. But she had Dowan now, and that made the loneliness easier to bear. They studied together in the library. They ate meals together in the cafeteria. Dowan asked endless questions about Earth, and Yuna answered them with patience and sometimes with humor. Is it true your species can eat capsaicin? Dowan asked one afternoon. We put it in our food on purpose. It's called spicy food. My mother makes a dish that would probably kill you. Dowan's scales turned white at the thought. Capsaicin was classified as a chemical weapon by most galactic species. The idea of eating it for pleasure was beyond his understanding. Your species is insane, he said. Probably, Yuna agreed with a smile. Their friendship was noticed by others. Some cadets thought Dowan was brave. Others thought he was foolish. But nobody tried to stop him. If the human decided to eat him, that was his choice. Then came the day of the survival simulation. The exercise was simple. Cadets were sent to a jungle moon to practice emergency protocols. They would spend 3 days navigating difficult terrain, building shelters, and working as a team. It was a standard part of academy training. Nothing was supposed to go wrong. The jungle moon was called the Tar 7. It was classified as a Class 4 planet, which meant it was moderately challenging, but not dangerous by galactic standards. The air was breathable. The plants were not poisonous. The only native creatures were small and harmless. For a human like Yuna, the Tar 7 felt like a vacation resort. The cadets were divided into groups of 8. Yuna was placed with Dohan, Instructor Hound, and 5 others. Instructor Hound was a Florian with a body made of living wood and leaves. She was not happy about having a human in her group, but she kept her complaints to herself. The first 2 days went smoothly. They built a shelter using fallen branches. They found fresh water in a nearby stream. They followed all the safety protocols exactly as they had been taught. On the 3rd day, They reached the mountain pass. The pass was narrow, cutting between two steep cliffs of loose rock. The cadets walked single file, moving carefully along the path. Below them was a long drop into a rocky valley. Instructor Hound was leading the group when her foot slipped. She grabbed at the cliff wall for support, but her wooden fingers hit the wrong stone. A crack appeared in the rock face above them. The rock slide started slowly, then grew into a thunder of falling stone. Yuna reacted before her mind could form thoughts. She grabbed Dohwan and threw him forward, away from the worst of the falling rocks. She pushed two other cadets in the same direction. Then a boulder struck the ground in front of her as she lost her footing. When the dust cleared, Yuna was on her feet again. Her arm was bleeding from a deep cut. Small rocks had bruised her face and shoulders. But she was standing, already moving, already searching. 3 cadets were buried under the rubble. Dohwan was one of them. The other survivors stood frozen. Their minds had shut down from the shock. Instructor Hound was screaming into her communicator for emergency transport, but the response would take time. Too much time. Yuna didn't wait. She ran to the pile of rubble and started digging. Her hands tore at rocks and stones, throwing them aside with strength that came from somewhere deep inside her. Blood ran from her fingers as her nails broke against the rough surfaces. She didn't stop. "Help me," she shouted at the others. "Dig, now." A few cadets finally moved, but they were slow and careful, afraid of hurting themselves on the sharp rocks. Yuna was not careful. She was not slow. She had entered a state that humans call survival mode, and nothing else mattered except reaching the people trapped beneath the stone. She found the first cadet quickly, a Mavari named Sora, who was unconscious but breathing. She pulled him free and left him for the others to care for. The second cadet was Instructor Hyun's assistant, a young Florian whose wooden body had protected her from the worst of the damage. She crawled out on her own once Yuna cleared the rocks from above her. The third cadet was Dohwan. Yuna found him trapped beneath a massive boulder. His scales had turned gray, the Pelian sign of severe distress. His chest was not moving. He was not breathing. The boulder was too heavy. No Pelian could lift it. No Florian could push it. It would take machines and time that Dohwan did not have. Yuna looked at the boulder. She looked at her friend. Something ancient woke up inside her, a force that her ancestors had used to survive ice ages and predator attacks and 1,000 other deadly challenges. Adrenaline flooded her system. She bent her knees, positioned her hands beneath the boulder, and lifted. Every muscle in her body screamed in protest. Her spine felt like it was being crushed. Her vision went wide at the edges. But she kept lifting, kept pushing, kept refusing to let her friend die. The boulder moved. 1 centimeter, then 2, then enough. "Pull him out." Yuna screamed through gritted teeth. 2 cadets rushed forward and dragged Dohwan's body from beneath the stone. The moment he was clear, Yuna dropped the boulder and collapsed to her knees. But she wasn't finished. Dohwan still wasn't breathing. His heart had stopped beating. On most worlds, this would be the end. But Yuna came from Earth, where humans had learned to fight death itself. She positioned her hands on Dohwan's chest and began pressing down, hard, fast, a rhythm that humans had practiced for generations. "What are you doing?" a cadet cried out. "CPR," Yuna gasped between compressions. "Heart massage. Keep his blood moving." She tilted Dohwan's head back, pinched his nose closed, and breathed into his mouth. Once, twice, then back to chest compressions. The other cadets watched in horror. It looked like she was attacking him. It looked violent and desperate and savage. It was all of those things. And it was saving his life. After 30 compressions and 2 more breaths, Dohwan coughed. His eyes flew open. He took a ragged breath, then another, then another. He was alive. Yuna sat back, her whole body shaking with exhaustion. Her hands were covered in blood, some of it hers, some of it Dawan's. She had broken 2 of his ribs with the force of her compressions. She had bruised his chest. She had hurt him, but he was breathing. The emergency transport arrived 20 minutes later. Medical teams rushed in with stretchers and equipment. They found 3 injured cadets and 1 human girl who looked like she had been through a war. A medic examined Do-hwan and turned to his colleague with wide eyes. 2 broken ribs. Severe chest bruising. But he's stable. He should have been dead. The colleague looked at Yuna, who was sitting on a rock nearby, still catching her breath. What did she do to him? Yuna heard the question. She looked up with tired eyes. I saved his life, she said simply. Nobody knew what to say to that. The tribunal was held in the Great Hall of the Academy. It was a room designed to make people feel small. The ceiling rose 30 meters above the floor. The walls were lined with portraits of famous admirals and scholars. At the front of the room sat the Academy Council, 7 of the most respected beings in the galactic education system. Yuna stood alone in the center of the room. She wore her academy uniform, freshly cleaned, but still showing faint stains that wouldn't come out completely. Her hands were wrapped in bandages. Her face still bore the marks of the rock slide. The charges against her were read aloud by a council secretary. Cadet Park is accused of excessive force during a rescue operation. She is accused of unauthorized medical intervention on a fellow cadet. She is accused of causing bodily harm to Cadet Do-hwan Kim, including 2 broken ribs and severe tissue damage. Yuna listened to the charges without expression. Inside, she felt tired. Not angry, not afraid, just tired. The head counselor, a Kovathi elder named Morn, looked down at her with all 6 of his eyes. Cadet Park, do you understand these charges? Yes, sir. How do you respond? Yuna thought for a moment before speaking. She chose her words carefully. I acknowledge that I broke Do-hwan's ribs during CPR. I acknowledge that my actions caused him pain. But I do not accept that these actions were wrong. He was dying. His heart had stopped. The only way to save him was to restart his heart manually. The force required to do that sometimes causes injury. On Earth, we accept this trait. Broken ribs heal. Death does not. Murmurs went through the observers seated behind her. This was not the apology they had expected. Counselor Morin made a note on his tablet. We will hear testimony from Professor Tova. Tova walked to the front of the room. His scales were pale, and he couldn't quite look at Yuna as he spoke. The human's actions demonstrate exactly what I warned about in my lectures. Humans do not understand restraint. They do not understand limits. Their instincts drive them to violence, to force, to breaking things. Yes, Cadet Kim survived. But this could easily have gone differently. She could have killed him. But she didn't. Admiral Boren interrupted from her seat on the council. Tova turned to her. Excuse me? You said she could have killed him. But she didn't. She saved him. The Admiral's voice was calm but firm. Professor, you spent years teaching about Deathworlders as if they were mindless monsters. But everything Cadet Park did on that mountain was calculated to preserve life. She threw other cadets to safety before protecting herself. She dug through rubble with her bare hands. She lifted a boulder that should have been impossible to lift. And then she used a medical technique from her home world to restart a stopped heart. At what point in this story does she become a villain? Tova's scales flickered with confusion. He had expected the council to share his concerns. Instead, they were questioning him. The broken ribs, he began, would have healed within weeks, the Admiral finished. The alternative was permanent death. I know which option I would choose. The tribunal was interrupted by the sound of the doors opening. Every head turned to see who had entered. Do-won Kim walked slowly down the center aisle. He was wrapped in medical bandages, and a support brace held his torso rigid to protect his healing ribs. His scales were still pale, and he moved with obvious pain. But he moved. "Cadet Kim, you should be in the medical ward," Counselor Morin said. "I know, sir, but I needed to speak." Do-won stopped a few meters from the council table. He was breathing carefully, trying not to strain his injured chest. "I needed to be here." "Very well. You may address the council." Do-won turned to look at Yuna. Their eyes met, and something passed between them. Understanding, gratitude, friendship. Then Do-won faced the council. "I was dead," he said simply. "I remember feeling my heart stop. I remember the darkness closing in. I remember thinking that I would never see my family again." He paused to steady his voice. "And then I woke up, because Yuna refused to let me die." He took a careful breath before continuing. When the rock slide hit, every other cadet froze. "I don't blame them. That's what our instincts tell us to do. When something terrifying happens, we freeze. We wait for the danger to pass. It's how our species survived for millions of years." He looked at Yuna again. "But humans didn't evolve that way. They evolved to act, to fight, to never give up." When everyone else was standing still, Yuna was already digging through the rubble. Do-won stepped forward, closer to the council. "Professor Tova taught us that Deathworlders are dangerous because they evolved to kill. But he missed something important. Humans didn't just evolve to kill. They evolved to survive. And surviving means protecting each other. It means refusing to accept death. It means breaking someone's ribs if that's what it takes to keep their heart beating." He turned to face the crowd of observers behind him. "I watched Yuna lift a boulder that weighed 3 times what she does. I watched her hands bleed as she dug through rocks. I watched her cry as she pounded on my chest, trying to bring me back." His voice cracked slightly. "That's not violence. That's love." The Great Hall was completely silent. Do-won turned back to the council. "You can punish her if you want. You can expel her from the academy. You can send her back to Earth. But you will be making a mistake. Because humans aren't monsters. They're survivors. And they don't just survive for themselves. They survive for the people they care about." He looked at Yuna with open affection. "Yuna Park is the bravest person I have ever known. And I am proud to call her my friend." He walked over to stand beside Yuna. The movement clearly hurt him, but he didn't seem to care. Admiral Bourne leaned forward. "Thank you. Cadet Kim, your testimony has been noted." She looked at her fellow council members. "I move that we dismiss all charges against Cadet Park." Counselor Morin nodded slowly. "Seconded. Does anyone object?" Silence. "Then the charges are dismissed. Cadet Park, you are free to continue your studies at this academy." He paused, and something like respect entered his voice. "And for what it's worth, I believe the galaxy is better for having humans in it." Yuna felt her eyes grow wet. She blinked rapidly, trying to maintain her composure. On Earth, this would be the moment to say something meaningful. But all she could manage was a simple phrase, "Thank you." Beside her, Do-won reached out and took her hand. His scales were warm against her skin. They stood together as the council filed out, and the observers began to leave. They had won. But more importantly, they had shown everyone what Deathworld's strength really meant. It wasn't about destruction. It was about refusing to give up. The weeks following the tribunal were strange and wonderful for Yuna Park. For the first time since arriving at the Galactic Academy, she was not alone. It started with small things. A Mivari cadet named Sora, who she had saved from the rock slide, sat next to her in the cafeteria. He didn't say much at first, just ate his meal in companionable silence. but his presence meant everything. Then a Florian student stopped her in the hallway to ask about human plants. She had heard that Earth had flowers that ate insects, and she wanted to know if it was true. Yuna explained about Venus flytraps and pitcher plants, and the Florian listened with fascination instead of fear. More cadets followed. They asked questions about Earth, about humans, about the strange and terrible world that had produced this quiet girl with the bleeding hands. And Yuna answered them all, surprised to find that people were genuinely curious rather than afraid. "Is it true your species runs for fun?" a Kovathi cadet asked one afternoon. "We call it jogging," Yuna explained. "Some people do it every morning. But running uses so much energy. Why would you waste it when nothing is chasing you?" Yuna smiled. "Because it makes us feel alive." The Kovathi didn't understand, but he nodded respectfully. On his world, running was something you did to escape predators. The idea of running for pleasure was completely alien to him. But he was beginning to learn that humans were alien in many wonderful ways. Dahuan healed quickly. Within 2 weeks, his ribs had mended enough for him to move without the support brace. He returned to classes with a new confidence, walking beside Yuna without any fear of what others might think. Their friendship had become famous throughout the academy. The Pelion who befriended the Deathworlder. It sounded like the beginning of a legend. One evening, Professor Tova found Yuna in the botanical garden. She was tending to a small plant in a clay pot. It had dark green leaves and tiny white flowers. "May I sit?" Tova asked quietly. Yuna looked up at him. There was no anger in her eyes, only patience. "Of course." Tova lowered himself onto the bench beside her. His scales shifted through several colors before settling on a shade of gray that meant uncertainty. "I owe you an apology," he said finally. "I spent years teaching my students to fear Deathworlders. I showed them the predators, the poisons, the dangers. But I never considered that survival might mean something different from what I assumed." Yuna continued tending her plant. "What did you assume?" "That survival meant becoming the most dangerous thing in the room. The Deathworlders had to destroy everything around them just to live another day." Tova's voice was heavy with regret. "I was wrong. You didn't destroy anything on that mountain. You rebuilt. You saved. You healed. That's what humans do," Yuna said simply. "Our world tried to kill us for millions of years. We could have become monsters. Some of us did for a while. We fought wars. We did terrible things to each other. But in the end, we learned that the only way to truly survive was to take care of each other." Tova watched her carefully tend the small plant. He noticed how gentle her hands were despite their strength. "What is that?" he asked, pointing at the plant. "Jasmine. It's from Earth. My mother gave me the seeds before I left home. She said it would remind me of where I came from. Does it?" Yuna lifted the pot and inhaled the sweet fragrance of the tiny flowers. For a moment, her eyes grew distant, seeing something far away. "It reminds me of summer nights on my grandmother's farm. We would sit on the porch and listen to the insects singing. The air smelled like jasmine and rain." She smiled softly. "Earth can be beautiful, Professor. Not just dangerous, beautiful." Tova considered this. In all his years of studying Deathworlds, he had focused only on the horror. He had never once considered that beings could look at such a place and see beauty. "I have a question," he said slowly. "If it's not too personal, ask. Why did you come here? To the academy, I mean. You must have known how other species would react to you. Why put yourself through this?" Yuna was quiet for a moment, choosing her words. "Because humans have spent most of our history alone. We thought we were the only intelligent life in the universe. When we discovered we weren't alone, some of us were afraid. But I was excited. I wanted to meet new people, learn new things, see what the rest of the galaxy had to offer." She looked up at the artificial stars. I knew it wouldn't be easy. I knew people would be scared of me. But I hoped that if I was patient and kind, they would eventually see that I wasn't a monster. Just a person from a difficult place. And now? Yuna smiled. Now I have friends. Now I have people who see me, not just where I come from. It was worth every hard day to get here. Tova nodded slowly. Something had changed inside him during this conversation. A wall had fallen. A door had opened. I'm going to rewrite my lecture, he said finally. The one about Deathworlds. I think I've been teaching it wrong all these years. What will you change? I'll tell my students the truth. That Deathworlds produce survivors, not monsters. That the same strength that lets a species survive terrible conditions also lets them protect others. That humans didn't become the dominant species on Earth by being the most violent. They became dominant by being the most cooperative. Yuna reached out and touched his arm gently. Her hand was warm against his scales. Thank you, Professor. That means more than you know. They sat together in comfortable silence as the artificial night deepened around them. The jasmine plant released its sweet perfume into the recycled air. Somewhere in the distance, cadets laughed and talked and lived their lives, no longer quite so afraid of the human in their midst. Later that night, Yuna walked back to her dormitory. She passed groups of students who nodded at her respectfully. A few even smiled. It wasn't acceptance yet, not completely, but it was a beginning. Doan was waiting for her outside her room. Good talk with the professor? He asked. Very good. He's going to change his curriculum. Doan's scales turned a warm shade of gold, the Pelian expression of happiness. That's wonderful. You're changing things here, Yuna. People are starting to see humans differently because of you. Yuna leaned against the wall beside him. I didn't do it alone. You stood up for me when no one else would. That's what friends do. She looked at him with gratitude that went deeper than words. On Earth, we have a saying. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Your world tried to kill you for millions of years, Doan observed. Yes, so humans must be very strong. Yuna thought about her grandmother's farm, about Jasmine and summer rain, about the courage it took to cross the galaxy alone, about the friends standing beside her now. We are, she said, but our real strength isn't in our muscles or our bones. It's in our hearts. It's in our ability to love people who are different from us, to protect strangers, to never give up on each other. She looked up at the stars visible through the corridor window. Somewhere out there was Earth, spinning through space, still producing humans who were brave and stubborn and full of love. That's what Deathworld's strength really means, Yuna said softly. Not the ability to destroy, the choice to defend. Doan took her hand, his scales warm against her skin. I'm glad you came to our academy. Yuna Park. She squeezed his hand back. So am I, above them. The stars continued their ancient dance. And in the hallways of the Galactic Academy, something new was being born. Understanding, friendship, hope. The human and the Pelian stood together, watching the universe spin. They had a long journey ahead of them, but they would face it together. That was the human way. That was the Deathworld way. And maybe, Doan thought, it could become the galactic way too.